If there's one scene in Breaking Bad that left fans confused and still gets talked about in forums to this day, it's this one. Gus walks out of the hospital after talking to Jesse. In the parking garage, he sees his car rigged with a bomb. He approaches, then stops, scans the area, and just turns around and walks away. If you're watching this for the first time, you're probably like, wait, what? How did he know? So, if we want to know why Gus didn't get in the car, we've got to rewind a bit. Back to who Gus is and how he thinks, and what makes him the kind of guy who can smell a trap from across the garage. To the outside world, Gus is a dream citizen, co-founder of Los Pollos Hermanos, proud board member of the local hospital, and a loyal friend of the DEA. This guy actually donates to anti-drug campaigns while secretly running the biggest meth operation in the Southwest. But beneath the polite smile and crisp button-up shirts is a machine that never stops analyzing. Gus doesn't guess. He calculates everything, always. Gus operated by one rule: control everything. He doesn't lose his temper, doesn't leave fingerprints, and doesn't act unless he's sure of the outcome. Gus built his empire slowly and methodically. He ran it like a CEO, not a gangster. He watches everyone, and he listens twice as much as he talks. With years of business experience and relentless analytical focus, Gus has built a mental map so precise, it gives him everything he needs to stay on top. So when something, even the smallest thing, feels off, he doesn't ignore it. He stops, he thinks, he calculates, and he makes the right call in a split second. And that's exactly what happened in the parking lot. And because Gus has a sixth sense for danger, and no one screams danger more than Walter White. From the moment they started working together, Gus knew Walt was a problem. Not because he wasn't smart, but because he was too smart, paired with an ego to match. That's a deadly combination. Walt also had ties to the DEA, a habit of poking dangerous people. And most importantly, Walt wanted to be the boss. And in Gus's world, there's only one boss. So Gus saw it coming from a mile away. If Walter White wasn't dealt with, he'd blow everything up, one way or another. Now let's drop in on our favorite emotionally damaged ex-junkie, Jesse Pinkman. At this point in the show, things are getting tense for the kid. Gus and Walt hate each other. Like, full on, one of us is gonna die soon kind of hate. Gus wants Walt dead because, again, Walt is arrogant, unpredictable, impossible to control, and just dangerous. Walt, on the other hand, wants Gus dead because Gus is planning to either kill him or, worse, replace him. Jesse is stuck in the middle. Gus likes him because he's loyal, and he's learned everything there is to learn from Walter about cooking tight meth. And Walt knows he can't build his meth empire without Jesse. Both Gus and Walt know whoever wins Jesse wins the war. So we've got Gus trying to isolate Jesse from Walt, and Walt is trying to convince Jesse that Gus is a monster. And Jesse just wants to make meth, not get killed, and maybe play some video games. Jesse finds out that Brock's in the hospital, and he's really sick. Jesse rushes over to check on him, and while he's outside smoking, he pulls out his cigarette pack. That's when he notices the ricin cigarette he'd hidden in there is gone. Now Jesse is confident someone, probably Walter, poisoned Brock. He runs to Andrea and tells her to let the doctors know he thinks Brock was poisoned with ricin. Jesse storms over to Walt's house, furious, and pulls a gun on him. Walter swears that he would never hurt a kid. Then he shifts the blame to Gus. He tells Jesse that Tyrus must have stolen the ricin cigarette. That Gus poisoned Brock to make Jesse believe Walter did it, because Gus is tying up loose ends. And what better way to turn Jesse against Walt by making him think Walt poisoned a child? And honestly, it tracks. Gus has used kids before in his business. He's not above hurting one if it gets him what he wants. Jesse buys it, and just like that, Walt and Jesse team up to take Gus down. Tyrus goes to get Jesse from the hospital to finish cooking a batch of meth before it's ruined. Jesse tells him that he's not leaving the hospital, and to tell Gus that if he has something to say about that, he can come meet him at the hospital and say it. Gus actually shows up at the hospital, sits with Jesse, and tries to convince him to come back to the lab. Meanwhile, Walt's bomb-rigging Gus's car to make sure Gus goes out with a literal bang. Everything seems to be going to plan. But then Gus walks out to the parking lot, heads toward his bomb-rigged car and stops, looks around, and just walks away, leaving us confused and Walt frustrated. Spoiler alert, Walt ends up killing Gus anyway in that iconic explosion scene. But then Jesse finds out that Brock survived, and tests say he wasn't poisoned with ricin. It was Lily of the Valley, a toxic but common plant. It has sweet-looking berries that kids sometimes eat by mistake, which could explain everything. Maybe it was just a terrible coincidence. But then, at the end of the episode Face Off, we see a Lily of the Valley plant sitting right there in Walt's backyard. Also turns out, Huel had pickpocketed the ricin cigarette from Jesse on Walt's orders. Then Walt used the plant from his own garden to poison Brock. The plan worked perfectly. perfectly. Jesse blamed Gus, they joined forces, and Walt got exactly what he wanted. With that, we know the full story. What about what Gus knows? He knows that Walter understands Jesse would never agree to kill someone unless they did something unforgivable, like, say, poisoning a child. And not just any child, one Jesse loves. That's the only scenario where Jesse would ever consider killing Gus. Gus also knows what kind of man Walter White is: calculating, manipulative, and dangerously persuasive. So when Gus visits Jesse at the hospital and learns that Brock wasn't just sick, he was poisoned, it all clicks. And Gus knows he didn't do it, which leaves only one explanation: Walt did it. He poisoned Brock just to frame Gus, because that's the only way Walter can turn Jesse against Gus. Then Gus notices something else. Jesse isn't accusing Walt. He isn't going after Walt, which likely means Jesse does think Gus did it. And now, Jesse's helping Walt kill him. Also, the fact that Jesse refuses to leave the hospital, telling Gus to come to him. That feels like a setup. When Gus heads to the parking lot and sees his car sitting there, unguarded, that's all it takes. He's dealt with the cartel. He's dealt with assassins. He knows how traps are set. So instead of getting in the car, he turns around and walks away, and probably calls an Uber. So why did Gus not get in the car? The answer is basically, does this analysis make sense to you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.